especially these 2 weeks that we're about to commemorate 26 years since the 3rd of Tammuz, since the time when the Rebbe's passing took place. So we figured that today, tonight, and next week, we will focus on the teachings and the influence and the legacy of the Rebbe. So who better than to invite as our guest lecturer tonight than Rabbi Elkanah Shmotkin. Rabbi Elkanah Shmotkin is the director who for the past of Jewish educational media, many times when you see a video of the Rebbe, you'll see it says GEM. So Rabbi Shmotkin is the one who puts it all together for the past 26 years. He's been archiving and he's built a state-of-the-art studio, enabling him to produce video and collect audio, the audio collection of the Rebbe's lifetime. Under his leadership, Jewish educational media has evolved into really a dynamic, multifaceted organization sitting at the crossroads of archival preservation, video production, and cutting-edge web, social media, and mobile app projects. GEM's flagship project is the Living Torah weekly video magazine. I'm sure many of you have seen regularly if you've been to any Chabad house. It is viewed, believe it or not, in 8 languages by almost 250,000 people a week, every week, with a full-time professional staff of 27 people. GEM serves as a resource for the worldwide Chabad Lubavitch community, as well as to academics, filmmakers, writers, and researchers around the world. Thanks to Rabbi Shmotkin, people who want to do any kind of research can call him up, and you have the Rebbe's teachings and many of the historical memories on their fingertips. In 1998, Rabbi Shmotkin founded a special project called My Encounter with the Rebbe, which is an oral history project aiming at recording the testimony of individuals who had special one-on-one interactions with the Rebbe. In 2006, under Rabbi Shmotkin's leadership, GEM launched an initiative to gather, preserve, and restore the recorded legacy of the Rebbe. Rabbi Shmotkin is also the co-author of the book, The Rebbe's Early Years. This all came about because Rabbi Elkanah had a vision that after the 3rd of Tammuz, the children, our children, who are growing up without being able to have the privilege of meeting the Rebbe, and many communities, as you know, Chabad has grown exponentially. Thousands and thousands new centers have opened since 26 years ago, the 3rd of Tammuz. And all these new people who were introduced to Chabad and to the Rebbe, they are now able to get a glimpse of the Rebbe's life, and they're able to experience the Rebbe's teachings through the wonderful documentaries and the video presentations that are prepared by Rabbi Shmotkin and his Jewish educational media. Thanks to him, a full generation of the Jewish community, Chabad, and even outsiders, the most secular Jew, are able to enjoy the Rebbe's teachings and guidance because of all of the documentation that he has prepared. So I just want to say, as I introduce Rabbi Shmotkin, it's a big honor, Elkanah, to have you here tonight. Your work is legendary. You know, what you do for Chabad community and for all others who have been so inspired and influenced by the Rebbe is truly thanks to your hard work, and also your tech savvy. What you've produced is always, you know, the finest of the fine. As I mentioned just this week, because of some of the work that you do, 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 nights ago, I received a video of me walking in front of the Rebbe to get a special blessing before I was sent on a unique mission to Bombay, India. So first of all, just to receive that video footage from 1987, after 33 years, was truly for me something very, very special. But also it taught me 2 things that I want to just share with everyone, and then I'll hand over the floor. One is, we see, why was I sent? I was sent there with Rabbi Shia Harlik, who's today the director of Las Vegas, because the Rebbe's vision, he wanted to reach every single Jew, no matter where in the globe. Today, you make that possible with all the with the high tech, savvy that you have. But in the old days, the Rebbe, and we see it with all my emissaries and my colleagues, the Rebbe put me on a plane and he says, I want you to find a Jew in the outbacks of Bombay, India. So everything that you represent tonight, that you're going to discuss tonight, how the Rebbe had the vision of reaching out to every single Jew. And while most of the world shunned modern technology, the Rebbe saw it as an opportunity to truly reach each and every one of Jew, every single one. And we see it here tonight firsthand by people joining from all over the globe to hear your presentation. And how else but with Zoom through the high technology of 2020. So Rabbi Elkanah, please take it away, and thank you again so much for joining us. I hope I didn't put you to sleep, and I hope you're still here. Oh, you're unmute you again. Okay, there you go.
Good evening, everybody. Rabbi Pinny, do my 45 minutes start now or 15 minutes ago when you
Hey, you have to blame Rabbi Yoelish for giving me the intro.
Oh boy. I was going to ask you where online you found that, because we can all go to bed. We can all, call it a night after that. Anyway, thank you for the introduction. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Hope we'll have an interesting and inspiring 45 minutes to an hour. You hear me okay? Okay, so you know what? Let's make sure everybody's really there, that we're looking at live people. Can we get to some hand waves? Hello? Ah, there we go. Baruch Hashem, all the way from Florida. Okay, so if you're here tonight, it's probably because the Rebbe touched you in some way. Either you met the Rebbe, or you studied his teachings, or you were inspired by a story of the Rebbe, or you watched him, or you were touched by a Chabad rabbi or Rebbetzin who were touched by the Rebbe. So tonight, let's spend a little bit of time exploring how the Rebbe embraced technology and the role that technology played in enabling the Rebbe to become, in the words of Joseph Telushkin in his New York Times bestseller, the most influential rabbi in modern history. That was supposed to be muted when I cleared my throat, sorry. So, many religious people are suspicious of anything new. Anything that they're not familiar with, or at least this is the way it used to be, and especially if you're talking about amongst the circles of Hasidic Rebbes and groups, there is an innate fear of things that are new in many cases. And any new technology, any new methodology, many things like that are only embraced very, very haltingly. Now, the Rebbe, immediately after he took the leadership of Chabad Lubavitch in 1950, had a very, very different approach, which perhaps today is ubiquitous with everything we know about Chabad, and it goes without saying, but at the time was incredibly, incredibly revolutionary. The Rebbe taught that, just as the Talmud says, the Talmud tells us that gold was only created for the purpose of being used in the Beit HaMikdash, in the Holy Temple. And there's a very interesting talk of the Rebbe on this topic. The Rebbe asks, isn't everything in the world created to serve Hashem? What's unique here that we say that gold was created to be used in the Beit HaMikdash? And the Rebbe goes on to explain that everything in the world is created for and can be used really for a range of reasons, but there is a small group of things that were created they were only created in order to be used to serve Hashem. And gold is one of them. And that's why the Talmud says that gold was created in order to be used in the Beis HaMikdash. And the Rebbe held that the same thing is with technology. Not only is technology not something that needs to be shunned, but the Rebbe felt and acted, and as we'll see over the next little while, the Rebbe truly believed that technology was created to serve Hashem and to enable us to connect like this and to teach Torah and to do mitzvahs. Now, when the Rebbe began his leadership, he really got a lot of flack for his embrace of technology. You have to put yourself in that time frame. It's several years after the Holocaust. Hasidim and the religious Jews are really licking their wounds, or the Jewish people as a whole, but the Hasidic courts are the ones that have anything remaining, are moving over to the United States, and everybody's kind of facing inward and trying to shield themselves and trying to put themselves back together and to keep the world out and rebuild their communities. And the Rebbe, right from day one, right from the day he accepted the leadership of Chabad Lubavitch, the Rebbe had the exact opposite approach. The Rebbe taught his Hasidim to look outwards. And amongst the many things that the Rebbe did that were totally against the grain was the Rebbe's embrace of technology. As an example, I believe it was in the 50s that some Lubavitcher Hasidim began to broadcast on the radio. First there was a program by a Rabbi Kanakov, then later on there were Tanya classes, eventually a Rabbi Weinberg did this, but there was tremendous opposition amongst many of the religious community or the Hasidic community in New York and elsewhere for the use of the radio. The radio has such terrible things on it. The radio can be used and is used for this, counterculture music and for, pushing the envelope on what is permitted and what's not. So how could you be utilizing it to teach Torah? And the Rebbe stood up and said, if it's technology, it's parav. It's not milchik, it's not flagship, it's not good, it's not bad, it's just there, and we can utilize it for good. That was a very, very unique thing at the time that the Rebbe started talking that way. And there was a lot of criticism, like many of the things that the Rebbe did. Yet the Rebbe held his own, and he believed deeply that technology must be used to serve Hashem and to teach Torah and to bring Jews together. I'm going to fast forward to 1970. One of the ways, or the main way that the Rebbe would transmit his Torah teachings, the main way that the Rebbe would transmit, would share the Torah's opinion on current events, the way that the Rebbe would teach and innovate in Torah was through the Farbrengen. The Rebbe would hold, you've probably seen videos of this, the Rebbe would speak at these huge gatherings that would be held at 770. And the Rebbe would speak for hours. He would speak on a topic, perhaps something on the Talmud. And then he would speak about current events and the Torah's view on them. And then perhaps he would urge the students at 770 that they have to get up and find a Jewish community to serve and to help. And he would speak about a huge variety of topics. And these talks were broken up by a nigun. People would say l'chaim, they would sing a song. Perhaps some people would walk over to the Rebbe and talk to him or ask him for a blessing. But these became the Rebbe's main way of transmitting, of teaching, of communicating with his Hasidim and with the world at large. So in 1970, a couple of students at 770 came up with an idea, and they asked the Rebbe's permission. They said, Hasidim around the world want to hear the Rebbe speaking live, not only to hear us telling them over later or to study the published works. How about we create a telephone link up, and they'll be able to hear the Farbrengen live? The Rebbe said, sure, that's great. And sure enough, at the next Farbrengen, these students rigged up the Rebbe's microphone to a tape recorder, to an amplifier, to some wires that went into the other room, and they unscrewed the front of the microphone of the telephone, and they clipped the wires, and they tied it all up, and lo and behold, what do you know? in Kfar Chabad and across Israel, Jews were standing and were listening to the Rebbe's Farbrengen live for the very first time. Now you have to realize at that time, Rabbi, if you allow me to share my screen, I will share some pictures of some of these things as I'm talking. And these students were the innovators of the innovators. In fact, as it grew, so this became a thing that first it started with one line to Israel, and then California, and then various places across the United States. And slowly but surely, this network of people who would call in on the telephone to get the live broadcast of the Rebbe's Farbrengen grew and grew and grew and grew until there were hundreds of locations. I can tell you, I remember as a child hearing the Rebbe's Farbrengens for hours on end. I did not necessarily understand, but that idea that the Rebbe speaks and across the world, the Hasidim are able to hear in real time was not only a huge innovation in Jewish tradition, but it was a huge technological innovation as well. Rabbi Chaim Baruch Halberstam is one of the true pioneers in this area, an Israeli student who had come to study at 770, and he just with guts and with sweat and they figured it out. He told me how after they grew to like 5 or 6 lines and they kept wiring another line into another line, and their whole amplifier exploded in the middle of a Farbrengen. But slowly but surely they figured it out until they built at the end. You fast forward a few years as it was continuing to grow, they built this really advanced switchboard that some of the Fortune 500 companies then came to them and asked them if they could copy their model that they made. It was automated. There was hundreds of lines going into one switchboard, and the network continued. Within Israel, for example, they would have one place that the signal would go to. And from there, they started broadcasting further. And remember, this is all by telephone. This is all very rudimentary, but super functional. And they had all of these different really interesting things. You could imagine in the 1970s, a phone bill for hours and hours. I remember even, in the United States, but certainly overseas was a huge, huge, huge expense. So one of the things that they would do is say after whatever time the rates drop, maybe 9 o'clock, they would pick up the phone and say, hey, it's 9 o'clock, hang up and call back so your rates go down. And in fact, it got to the point where if they forgot to do that, the phone company would call them and say, hey, you guys aren't hanging up and calling back. Tell your people to hang up and call back so they get the better rate. And this was happening really across the world at the time. Now, this continued onward and grew and picked up steam for many years. This is all the way from 1970, and this lasted until 1994 at Gimel Tammuz, the Rebbe's passing. But about 10 years later, 10 years after this began, that's where the genesis of GEM, our organization, is. In 1980, the Rebbe told Rebbe Hill David Krinsky, who's the founder of GEM, the Rebbe told him something very cryptic about embracing technology and him getting involved in it. And this was the Rebbe called him into his office. Rebbe Krinsky's father, Rebbe Yehuda Krinsky, is one of the Rebbe's secretaries. And the Rebbe sent Rebbe Krinsky out to call in his son, who at the time was a yeshiva student in his 20s. And the Rebbe told him something about embracing technology or continuing to do things with technology. And Rebbe Krinsky really didn't know where he should go with this and what it meant. And lo and behold, a short time later, he was on a flight. And next to him a fellow was sitting next to him, and like any good Chabadnik, he started chatting with him. And what do you know? The guy was a license holder. He was a technician who could do satellite uplinks. At the time, the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, you had to have a license to operate a satellite dish. And they got to talking, and he started explaining to him how satellites work, and there's an uplink and a downlink, and people can see it across the world. And if you're going very far, so one satellite sends to another satellite to another, and they're talking about this, and suddenly a light goes off in his head and say, hey, people could actually be experiencing the Rebbe's Farbrengen not only through listening, but they could actually be present with video as well. And so began, he requested the Rebbe's permission, the Rebbe allowed it, and before you knew it, there were these big television cameras coming into the middle of this Hasidic, middle of the Farbrengen. You'd have these guys from NBC Sports and from ABC News showing up, you know, with their jackets, and they're schlepping cameras into 770, and they set up a makeshift broadcast room upstairs in 770. And before you knew it, the Rebbe's Farbrengens were being broadcast live via satellite, all the major ones, several every single year. I could tell you, as a child in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, I remember that we would take a nap that day, the few times a year that the Farbrengens would be broadcast. And we would have to drive out to Racine, where my parents and the community would rent a room in a hotel, because there was no cable television yet in Milwaukee, and there was cable in Racine. And we would be there. I remember being there till 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, watching and experiencing the Farbrengen in real time. Now you have to realize at this time, the only entities utilizing satellite technology were governments and major television networks. And here you have these young Hasidim, you have this Bacher, this yeshiva student who kicked off this project, which later turned into an organization, where thousands of people around the world, in Israel, before long, stadiums were being filled. Yad Eliyahu was filled with thousands of people live watching the Rebbe in real time, all because, you know, one of the Rebbe's students thought of this idea, and inspired by the Rebbe's approach to technology, saying that there's nothing to fear, let's figure out how to utilize it, let's figure out how to allow technology to help us to bring Yiddishkeit further. They were really, really at the cusp of the usage of many of these technologies, these early pioneers. After a short time, they added simultaneous translation. Rabbi Manes Friedman would do the translation in real time. And they continued to grew to cable stations across the United States and across Canada. Now you have to realize what we're dealing with here. At 9:30 at night, when the Farbrengen would start, or sometimes at 8:30 at night, you fast forward 7 hours. So when you're talking about a full stadium in Israel, this is, where are we? 9:30, 10:30, 11:30, 12:30, 1:30, 2:30, 3:30 in the morning, the Farbrengen starts. And I remember when I was studying in France, we'd get up in the middle of the night to hear the Rebbe talking. But this went on. Hasidim around the world gathered, and many other people who did not consider themselves Hasidim would come as well and experience these Farbrengens, which were enabled, obviously, through this technology. Now, just a little bit of the technical stuff of how satellites work, because now it's not a big deal. We're all talking to one another right on Zoom. But the way it would work in most cases was they would, Rabbi, if you allow me to screen share, I'll share some pictures. Oh, we're on, okay. Now I have to jump. Are we sharing? Let's make sure we're sharing the right screen. Rabbi Denberg, Rabbi Yankee Denberg, shake your head. You're seeing my screen? Because I can't see so this is WLCC, the control room that I was telling you about for the telephone link-ups. This is, of course, after a number of years, but you see up there all the rotary phones up back there on the wall, and there's the tape recording systems on the left, and they're monitoring, they're taking the incoming calls. This was a little bit an earlier version of it. And this is one of the early Farbrengens, the way they're listening. It's already morning in Israel. You see, they're wearing talis and tefillin. And they're listening to the Rebbe's Farbrengen. And then moving on to Gem. This was one of the larger ones, but this is right in front of 770. If you recognize this is the service lane. This was for a Hanukkah Live in 1989. You see January 89 here in the corner. But the way this would work at a typical Farbrengen was there would be cables going up from the cameras to the control room at 770. And there they would have a control room set up with the technicians. That's by the way, that's Rabbi Krinsky, or David Krinsky. And this is how the switching looked. These are, these guys, this engineer here worked for NBC Sports, and these guys had a blast. I remember a little bit of this as a child, but Rabbi Krinsky told me on a number of occasions how they just absolutely loved this job. Coming to 770, standing there amongst thousands of chassidim who were pushing around, it's so new and different than filming, NASCAR is boring compared to this. This is actually I'm forgetting his name right now, but he was the number one main cameraman. This is the audio room and where they were recording. Now you see these tape decks, we're gonna get to this, these tape machines that you see sitting here are what today we now know is creating the ability for us to have something that's as precious as gold. These experiences and memories with the Rebbe were almost as an afterthought. Well, we're ready doing this broadcast, let's pop in a tape and hit record. And it's a fascinating, it's really interesting that nobody gave it more attention at the time to the recording, but thank God they did. They did do these recordings, which we're now really able to study directly from the Rebbe because of. We'll jump ahead a few years to Gimel Tammuz, 1994. And we're marking Gimel Tammuz exactly a week from tonight, the 26th year. But after the Rebbe's passing, obviously there was a tremendous void felt and a tremendous thirst. And I had access to some of these tapes. I knew that they were sitting somewhere in a basement. And I asked for permission to take some of those tapes and edit a video. And it was right before Yud Shvat, the anniversary of the previous Rebbe's passing, and the Rebbe becoming the Rebbe, accepting the leadership of the movement. And I received permission to make a video for this special occasion. So I went and I studied through all of the Yud Shvat Farbrengens that were on video, and I looked for the themes, what the Rebbe spoke about on these, I would speak about often on Yud Shvat, and found nice excerpts from all the different years and wrote a narration to tie them together. And we made I think it was about a 28-minute video. Was narrated, with the Rebbe speaking, a couple of pieces of the Rebbe speaking. At the time, we got Rabbi Manis Friedman, who used to do the live translations. He did a voiceover translation. And before I did it, I went to Rabbi Yehuda Krinsky, who runs Merkaz Linyanei Chinuch, the central Lubavitch institution that sends out the shluchim. And I explained my idea to him, and he loved it. He thought it was great. And I said, it's going to cost about $18,000. Now, I was working a different job, but this was something I was doing on my own in the evenings. But I said that was the approximate expense. We'd schlep these boxes of tapes to Manhattan. There'd be a room as big as my living room full of equipment, and tape decks, and an editor. It was $250 an hour or something at that time. So I asked him if he would help with the sponsorship, and he said yes. And in fact, if you look at the back of that first VHS tape, it says, sponsored by Merkaz Linyanei Chinuch. What happened, though, was that people really liked it, and shluchim and communities around the world bought these tapes, and then we translated it to Hebrew, and the sales covered the $18,000. So I went to Rabbi Krinsky afterwards, and I gave him back the 18 grand. And I can tell you, I'll probably never make a mistake like that again. But it was just something we were doing on the side, as almost as a hobby. I mean, we knew how important it was, but it wasn't yet a full-time job. And from there, things really took off. People wanted more. We had different ideas. We gave out a number of unedited Farbrengens with translation. In fact, one of our early innovations, and I'm remembering back now how people really objected to it at the time, I said, we're listening to Rabbi Friedman and he does a great job, but the truth is that now that we're dealing with pre-recorded material, we can actually hear the Rebbe and subtitle him below. And that way you could read and you can hear, and but there was this is tradition, and what are you doing? And this is, thank God this is the way everybody watches videos of the Rebbe today. But it's just interesting when you come up with innovations or changes, you know, you could look back and laugh at it. But at the time, it was really big stuff. And we had a number of, innovations that we pushed through the years. Anyway, let's fast forward a little bit. As this picked up steam, I started doing it full time. We brought in an editor. We bought an editing system. We started producing films. And it continued to pick up speed. A number of people joined. We started doing productions in many different languages. And you have to realize the years are passing and Lubavitcher children are growing up and the movement is expanding. And new people are going out who consider themselves the Rebbe's shluchim. And to a very large degree, these videos are providing the fuel and the inspiration and the impetus for a lot of this to happen. In fact, if you think about it, we're at the first point in the history of the world where people can, through technology, can consider themselves and can be true first-person students of the Rebbe even after his passing, because the experience of video allows us to study directly from the Rebbe, not from a book, which books are great, don't get me wrong, but not from the shliach, not from the rabbi telling us something from the Rebbe, but I can learn directly from the Rebbe today. This is the first, so every day, you know, when we get up and we think about where we're going next and what we're doing, we really have this feeling, and I believe it's true, that we're really pushing the envelope. This has never before been done. So today, just to fast forward, today we have 30 people or so working full-time on curating, producing, translating, editing, restoring, preserving, interviewing, and I'll get into some of those really interesting things that we're doing in a minute. Full-time staff that's doing this. It's a production house we have here. Actually, if we have a few minutes later, maybe we'll give you a little walk around. A full-blown production house that's doing this. We're going now on about 25 years straight that we're doing this. Our budget is $3 million a year. And thank God the Rebbe's image and the Rebbe's voice are really ubiquitous across the world. That you could see it every day on Facebook and YouTube and WhatsApp, and you could find talks of the Rebbe online. And thank God, it's safe to say that there are millions of people who have seen and watched and been inspired by the Rebbe directly through these videos. You know what? I feel like it's time to get up. I can't see enough faces. I'm going to give you a walk around the archive since somebody sent me a message. Let's see what you see. Let's see the view. So, Rabbi, I called in with another phone in the beginning just in case we'd get this request. So we're going to unmute over here.
To figure out how to do this without getting feedback.
With me on the other phone, I'm going to turn this one off.
So I muted your first one, and now you're
this one on. You hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay. We there?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to take you and walk you through some of the office, and then later I'll tell you about the projects that are being fueled here. So I need to get up on my feet. It's been a long day of work. So I'll show you some of the more interesting parts of the operation. Okay, so as you can imagine, it is 8:05 here now in New York, so we're not going to have many people in the office. But one of the projects, and I'll tell you about it in a minute, was a massive project that we launched. It was about 2005, where we launched a project to gather, restore, preserve, and provide access to all of the audio, video, and photographic recordings of the Rebbe's life. And here is our archive preservation area. For the most part, the crisis that existed with the degradation, the magnetic media degradation of videos has been met. For the vast majority of videotaped material of the Rebbe has already been restored, preserved, and we're in the midst of providing more and more access to it. The audio, we're still in the middle, and just so you know, we keep all of the material offsite in secure storage, but sometimes we have some videos coming through, some audio tapes coming through for transfer. Here we have some old reel-to-reel machines where we do some of these transfers. Actually, Rabbi Shalom Ber Eber, one of the original pioneers of WLCC, was just here today, and he comes in every day to transfer the old audio tapes. And actually, it's interesting to know that many of the things that we did, we actually created new technology that now the preservation industry is using some of the things that we innovated. I'm sure many of you will recognize some of these decks. Here we have a 3/4 inch deck. That would play the tape that I showed you in original recording of the Farbrengen from the 1980s. Here we have some beta SVHS decks. Some of the amateur or mid-level photographers would shoot on that. This is Beta SP. Some of the later videos would be filmed on that, the higher quality videos. Reel-to-reel decks over here. And these are some of the computers into which they're transferred. Now, I hope it's not too loud in here. I'll take you into the server room. Rabbi, can you hear me okay?
I hear you. It's a little noisy, but I hear you.
I need to go out just to hear you. What did you say?
I said, we hear you. We hear you. It is a little noisy.
Okay. So anyway, here are some of our servers. This is the Avid Unity where we do the editing. We have editors now across the world who can collaborate through this system here. This is some of our internal networks and the archive system. Now this here is the one and only 1 petabyte system where thousands of hours of high resolution video, thousands of hours of audio, and hundreds of thousands of photos are stored. Now I'll have you know, obviously everything is backed up off-site, as well as the originals are kept there. But this is what enables us to triple and quadruple our production output from the way it was only a few years ago. You know, not long ago, the room here next to me was full of tapes. And just to find one clip of the Rebbe talking could take you 20, 30 minutes. You'd pop in one tape and fast forward, rewind, no, it's not here. Pop in the next one. Oh, it's left at the end of the tape. You got to find it. Whereas now, I could show you when we get back to my desk, in a moment, we can find any day, any location, any photographer, and any content of the Rebbe that we're looking for right here, and any of our staff around the world. And of course, we're working to continue enabling this access so that anybody out there can be able to access it in this way. I'll take you to a couple of the other more interesting areas. Oh, look at this. I just want to introduce you to Rabbi Tzapp. He's working on an upcoming Living Torah. He is the director of Living Torah. And folks, you're seeing it here. Here we go. Oh, I know this Sikha. We are working. Oh, wait. You want to show us what you're up to, Rabbi? This is your live broadcast. We're doing a special program for Gimel Tammuz, and it focuses on a very unique and interesting talk of the Rebbe, explaining a Gemara, a passage of Talmud, in a way that had never before been understood. Tune in next week for this amazing program. But anyway, here's one of our editing rooms. So obviously COVID changed everything in the world and is absolutely fascinating. And I'm so proud of our team that, thank God, we managed to continue every single week without fail so far, thank God, continue pushing out our flagship video, Living Torah, tremendous production every single week. Even though obviously we were all remote, we were in different places, and high resolution, high quality video editing is a really big deal to do that when you were remote. But thank God we managed to continue. So this editing room, which is a very nice editing room, is actually, although you don't see anybody sitting here, Yankee Asher, our senior editor, is sitting in Jerusalem, and he's editing on this machine over here. And you will see it on next week's Living Torah. And as well, a number of the other stations here. This is actually by somebody in South Florida, our production coordinator, Eli Sapo. And this is Yisrael Kiefman, who's in upstate New York. And you're not seeing them here, but you're seeing the machines with which they're working remotely. Okay, now I'm going to take you into a space that's we're really excited about. We only built this about a year ago. And once again, I'll tell you a little bit more about the interview project, the My Encounter Oral History Project. But for years, we've been doing interviews and logistics and setting up and finding a good place was a really, really big deal. So about a year ago, we decided we were going to create our own studio, and that would enable us to do more interviews for less money and less time. So, we all know how it works with, the Zoom zone. Each of us have one. Just a little area behind us where you tape it off and you make sure that that area is neat. That's how it works in a television studio too. I'll give you a look around the room, and then when we get back to my desk, I'll show you what the picture actually looks like. So this is sound padding. This is a totally soundproof room. If you probably noticed, we have double doors out there. Let's turn on some of the lights for you. Lights, camera, action. A couple of microphones. Don't forget the backlight. Got to look nice. And if you're an interviewee, which many interviewees are quite intimidated, that's the view you're getting. And the shot, of course, is this way. And it's a really nice, pretty shot. And when I come into this room, there's one story of the Rebbe that I remember. And that is when President Shazar of Israel, one time when he came to New York, there was a really big controversy from some of the Israeli politicians and the media because they knew that President Shazar was a chassid and he was going to meet with the Rebbe when he was in New York. And his plan was to come to 770, to come visit the Rebbe. He's a chassid. A chassid comes to the Rebbe doesn't go to a chassid. But some of the journalists felt that this was not appropriate. This is the president of Israel. The Rebbe should be paying him a visit. And there became a controversy around it. And in the end, of course, President Shazar came to the Rebbe. We actually did a really nice program on that a couple months ago, available at 70years.com. You could find that program about that visit. But when he was in the Rebbe's office, the Rebbe pointed at his desk and he said, "You see this desk? Or you see these walls? These walls have absorbed the tears of thousands of people. And this desk have heard the tzaris of thousands of people. That I could not bring to you in Manhattan." So when I look around this room and I think about the memories of the Rebbe that were shared here and the inspiration and the teachings, and those of you who are familiar with the interviews will know what I mean. They look like simple black walls, but to me, they're really, really steeped with meaning and with emotion. And I think back about some of my experiences with the Rebbe and how meaningful they are to me and how everybody is now passing them on to their children and grandchildren. And lots of it happens right here in that simple room. Anyway, so that's a little look at some of our key spaces. We've got the offices there where the scholars are studying, the different sichos, the different talks of the Rebbe. But that's it for our quick tour. We're going to get back to the desk now. I got to make sure I don't turn the camera for you to see that desk over there where the mess is. Very important. Okay, and we're back.
Rabbi?
Okay. Hear me?
Yeah, Rabbi, could I?
We still have a few minutes.
Okay.
I want to tell you a little bit more about some of the exciting projects we're doing, and then on to my favorite part if we have time. I love questions and answers. But just going to tell you a little bit about that archive preservation project I was telling you about. In about 2005, we were confronted with a massive crisis. And that was that we learned that magnetic media was never intended for long-term existence, was never intended for long-term preservation. And a video that we only 6 months earlier were able to play, and it would play just fine. It was nice and sharp. It was suddenly was getting caught in the tape heads. And an audio tape that was clear only a short time earlier was suddenly not as clear. And just for a quick little science lesson, the way magnetic media videotape works is there's a piece of plastic, there's an adhesive, it's like glue that goes on top of it. And then there's magnetic particles that go on top of that. They were never intended to last for decades. In fact, get this, videotape was invented to last for 3 hours. The major news network did not want to have to do and make the investment of 2 live telecasts, one for the East Coast, one for the West Coast. They invented videotape to save that money, so it was invented to last for 3 hours. And now we're here decades later, and so these tapes are falling apart. Anyway, crisis, we went running around. I'm this young yeshiva student. All I'm trying to do is put out some videos. I went to this archive and that archive. You know, I couldn't get the attention it needed. So we launched a project called the Living Archive to gather, restore, preserve, and provide access to all of the recordings of the Rebbe's life. A whole bunch of other collections were acquired, unified, turned into one world-class archive of all the audio, video, and photographs. And obviously, the purpose of it all is to teach, is to share, is to inspire, and thank God we're doing that literally every day outside requests and journalists that we're working with and academics and Jewish communities around the world, obviously, in addition to all of our own production. Now, several years after we embarked on, and by the way, thank God that was a hugely successful project. There's always more. We're always getting in little additional collections. Actually, something really, really nice came in just yesterday. A very interesting audio tape I'm going to tell you about. Very unique, and it's going to be coming out in the program soon. Somebody discovered this. We had been looking for it for years, and it came yesterday. But what happened next was, a few years into this project of restoring and preserving the magnetic media, we realized something. The Rebbe's published works, there's a team of people working on them. Huge sets of books, 200 volumes or so. And they're still not yet finished catching up to the Rebbe's scholarly output. Tens of thousands of letters are being published. We're dealing with the video and the audio and the photographs. But there's something missing. And that is that so much of the Rebbe's life and so much of the Rebbe's influence was through one-on-one experiences, was behind those closed doors in that room with that desk that I was telling you, the Rebbe's own room. When you think about Soviet Jewry, when you think about the leaders of Israel, when you think about Jewish communities around the world, the Rebbe worked with these people and on these relationships behind closed doors. And that was being taken with people in their hearts and minds. So we launched this oral history project with the only goal of saving and making sure that this material is preserved. We didn't even realize the value of a story and how, I mean, obviously we knew that it was important material, but from that spawned an entire, really additional institution, entire world of stories of the Rebbe, authenticated, true, first-person stories that we publish. We publish in video, we publish in photo, we publish in print. There's a weekly one that comes out. In fact, our absolute favorite book called My Story sold very well, thank God. We're actually wrapping up volume 2, and it's going to print soon. My point being, thank God these stories are a tremendous source of inspiration and learning. And in a way, it's even more inspiring than the Rebbe's direct talks. There's something about a story that everyone wants to hear, whether you're a scholar or a teenager who's out on the street, you know, having a rough day, or anyone in between. These stories have been incredibly, incredibly impactful. So that was another massive project we launched. We have, to date, over 1,500 high quality, high resolution, top level interviews and 25,000 pages or so of transcripts. Every interview is transcribed. And there's constantly new ones coming in. Actually, just yesterday, interview with President Rivlin. coming soon to a production near you. President Rivlin of Israel, Reuven Rivlin. We're constantly doing new interviews. Actually, right when I finish tonight, we're going to be interviewing somebody a little bit later. So, and this is just an incredibly inspiring project.
Rabbi Shmotkin. Elkanah.
Switching to DVD was a really big deal. I remember when we said, people, we have to stop with VHS. We're moving to DVD. And there was a mutiny. How could you? We have VHS decks in all the synagogues and Jewish community centers around the world. We have VHS decks and we're not going to be able to play your stuff. So we said, big deal. So you'll go buy a DVD player. You'll figure it out. Well, as it turned out, the next jump, the one that we're making now from DVD to internet, delivery through the web is much more difficult and much more complicated. Even though we're sure we need to do that, you can't even buy a computer with a DVD player anymore. One of the main venues through which people watch these videos of the Rebbe, one of the central ones are Jewish synagogues and Jewish community centers. And everybody's got their built-in projector or the cart that they roll out, and there's not necessarily good Wi-Fi in those areas. So it's a whole big spiel that we're trying to help everybody transition. But the good news is that one of the many good outcomes of this terrible plague that we're all going through is that DVD delivery became impossible. We stopped fulfillment and shipping and cutting out, by the way, a very large 6-digit expense from the budget. And that enables us to put that money into the technology side. And DVDs are out and they're not coming back. But I'm just interesting that this transition is much more difficult around the world. In Israel especially, we're getting a lot of complaints from there. But that's one of the things that we're in the midst of doing right now. I personally was never into my pictures with the Rebbe. I don't know why, but there were these photographers around 770, and they would always, after some of the major events, they would sell pictures, and you could find often a picture of yourself with the Rebbe, whether the Rebbe gave you a little bit of wine or lekach or $1 for tzedakah or whatever it was. I don't know why I never bought it. Maybe I had those experiences in my heart, so I didn't feel like I needed it. It needed the picture. Even after Gimel Tammuz, I don't know why, after the Rebbe's passing, it wasn't a big thing for me. But thank God today I have children, and I've begun to see what it means to them when they see a picture of me with the Rebbe. And by the way, I always had I had got a lot of pleasure out of helping people find their videos and their photos with the Rebbe, but I don't know why, it was never my thing. Until I began to see what it means to my children when they see a photo of me with the Rebbe. And that's when I began, that was one of the ways that I saw how incredibly powerful this medium is, that the Rebbe allowed himself to be photographed, and how meaningful that is now. So if I could do another quick share screen, Rabbi Pinny. By the way, the good thing with Zoom is if it gets too long, you just go, it's just one click and I'm gone. So
therefore, I'm going to allow you to share the screen. If I could ask you just one question.
The Living Archive site. We have 325,000 photos up here. And let's hope this works because we're live. That's me. And I don't know why. I never, ever bought these photos. I don't know why there are this many photos of me.
We're not
with
seeing
the Rebbe. Rabbi Pinny, I see you're trying to speak. Oh, I know it's wrong. No wonder I'm hacking you and I had to turn my audio off when I switched. Now I'm going to hear you. Were you saying something?
Yes. So first of all, this picture is not of you. It's of the Rebbe.
Oh, well, I was going to hit search, but then I realized, oh my gosh, you're trying to speak. And you've probably been trying to speak for a while, but my speaker.
Do that for a second, and then because we don't have too much time, so I want to just ask you to perhaps do something, but go ahead. Do your.
That's it. No, we don't need everybody to watch pictures of me with the Rebbe. The point being, the value of this recording in inspiration and in motivation and in teaching young people today, it's not a theory. It has been proven already. We're 25 years in here, that the technology enables people to continue studying from the Rebbe and continue to be inspired. And with that, Rabbi Pinny, I guess we're out of time.
And as I mentioned before the class, that actually just 2 days ago, somebody sent me the video, the first time I saw it, of me getting a blessing from the Rebbe. to go to India. And today somebody sent me a picture of my grandmother going to the Rebbe for $1. But be it as it may, Rabbi Elkanah, you mentioned it yourself, there's nothing more fascinating as a story, and people love stories. So if I can ask you to maybe just close off the evening with sharing with us maybe just 2 fascinating stories, maybe one fascinating story that you uncovered, that you discovered about the Rebbe, that perhaps people don't know, from all the archives that you've uncovered. Share with us maybe like one little nice, great story that we could go home with, you know, a little bit of an inspiring story, and maybe something similar with one of the many people that you've interviewed. How many people have you already interviewed that had an interaction with the Rebbe?
Well, we interviewed approximately 1,500 people. I can't say that I did it myself. We have a whole team that does that. I myself probably, well, you know, actually I interviewed, I think it was 4 Israeli prime ministers. This was before we built up the whole project. So we had some interesting interviews there. You want to hear, it's like, Rabbi Pinny, who's your favorite child? I can't come up with a favorite story like that. I'm just looking through this book now to see if any of the stories are going to, how about if I share with you a story of myself with the Rebbe? Because that's easy to remember, and that's me. By the way, yeah. I was 12 years old. From when I was 7, my father used to bring me every Simchas Torah to the Rebbe for the special holiday, for the Hakafas. I've, thank God, very, very vivid memories of the many times I was by the Rebbe for Simchas Torah. And I'm eternally grateful to my father for having done that, because now I'm the father of 7-year-olds and former 7-year-olds, thank God. And I know what it means to schlep a kid on a plane and have to take care of him in 770 for a few days myself. Anyway, my father did it every year from when I was 7 years old. One year, I got separated from my father sometime in the middle of Simchas Torah. I couldn't find him. And if you're familiar with the videos or the pictures of 770, 770 is a huge room with like bleachers on both sides and all the Chassidim standing in the middle. But on Shabbos Yom Tov, it would be like 3/4. The first quarter would be empty. Long story short, I was in that space waiting. The Rebbe was farbringing, but I didn't have a place. The Rebbe was speaking. And some of the New York kids, Rabbi Pinny, are you from New York?
Yes, I am.
You guys were scary as kids. Let me tell you, to a kid from the Midwest coming to visit 770, you were a scary bunch. Anyway, the New York kids were running around, and so I pulled over one of the kids and I said, sounds like the Rebbe's screaming. Do you hear the Rebbe's voice like over the bleachers? He's like, I don't know. But if you climb you climb through there, you'll come out right by the Rebbe. Anyway, I don't know how I had the guts. I climbed through under this long table, and I came out nowhere else than 6 inches away from the Rebbe on his right side on the floor. Okay, and that was a place that children were allowed. There were no children then, maybe because it was a unique time. And the Rebbe started speaking about the last verse of the Torah, which speaks about Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses. It speaks about all the miracles he did for the Jewish people, and he did it all before the eyes of the Jewish people. And Rashi, the commentary, says, what does that refer to? That his heart soared and he smashed the tablets, he smashed the luchas. And the Rebbe was asking a list of questions. Is that the greatest thing Moshe Rabbeinu did? And did he have to do it before the eyes of the Jewish people? It's the last thing of the Torah. Whole list of questions, and I'm doing the short version here. Anyway, the Rebbe went on to explain, and I have to tell you, as a child, I was not able to concentrate. I would not typically be able to understand, but anybody could have understood this. The Rebbe spoke with such passion. He explained, why did Moses break the tablets when he came down from Mount Sinai? His heart soared and he broke the luchos. Why did he do it? Because when he came down, the Jewish people were worshiping the golden calf. And he knew that he was holding in his hands their death sentence. So he broke it so that they wouldn't get in trouble, right? Because it said, thou shalt not have any gods, any other gods. So that's why he did it. He did it. He sacrificed himself, and he sacrificed that which Hashem had bestowed him, had given him, in order to save the Jewish people. And the Rebbe went on to explain, this is what a true Jewish leader is, that he's ready to sacrifice himself. He's ready to do something that's potentially against what Hashem would have wanted, just to save the Jewish people. And this is the greatest thing you could say about Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, as the Rebbe was saying this, he began to cry. And he began to cry. And there were times that the Rebbe cried a little bit. It was very rare, but even that. But the Rebbe began to sob as he was speaking. He was explaining, this is what a Jewish leader is. He's ready to sacrifice everything for the Jewish people. And he did this before the eyes of the Jewish people because it's a lesson for every Jew of Avos Yisrael. And there was a point at which the Rebbe could not continue speaking. He was crying so hard. And I'm sitting there on the floor. And I don't think anybody else could have seen this, maybe one or two other people, which is why I try and share it whenever I can. Because if you've seen the pictures, there are people sitting behind the Rebbe. There's a table, and there are people down there. But how many people were between the Rebbe and the table? Not many during that talk. I was probably the only one, but maybe there was another one or the two other people. And as the Rebbe was explaining this about how Moshe Rabbeinu is Avos Yisrael, his love for a fellow Jew, and it's a lesson to all of us, I remember watching from the corners of the Rebbe's beard, drip, 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 the tears falling onto his kapata. And looking up and seeing just drip, drip. That's how intensely the Rebbe was crying and trying to teach us what Avos Yisrael is and what true Jewish leadership is. So we're now a few days before Gimel Tammuz. There are so many things we need to learn from the Rebbe, but perhaps first and foremost, something that any of us can do is to increase in our Avos Yisrael. And I just want to finish with one thing, and that is we have the ability today to learn from the Rebbe even more than before Gimel Tammuz, to a certain extent. Obviously, if you were there, you would come to a Farbrengen and you would listen to the satellite link up or whatever it is. But today, any person can learn directly from the Rebbe through technology, right on your smartphone, right on your computer, wherever and whenever you want, in the comfort of your home with subtitles, perfectly curated for you. We need to take advantage of this opportunity to be able to learn directly from the greatest Torah teacher there is and to be inspired by him. And may we be reunited with the Rebbe and all of our loved ones with the coming of Mashiach now.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Elkanah. That was really great. Rabbi Elkanah Shmotkin, Executive Director of GEM, Jewish Educational Media, who again is archiving all the memories of the Rebbe and all the teachings. And we hope that each and every one of you tonight who are listening will make sure to log on to one of the many Chabad websites and onto GEM and continue. There's so many speakers and resources for you to study the Rebbe's teaching. I want to welcome each and every one of you who joined from all over, from Rabbi Yolish Gans, Rabbi Ben Zion Singer of the Chabad of the Lauderdale by the Sea. I saw Rabbi Natan Grumblatt from Argentina, Rabbi Shimon and Druzier from Chabad of Century Village, Young Israel Century Village Chabad. Shui Biston, Rabbi Shui Biston I saw on Facebook Live from Parkland. Rabbi Yankee Denberg, who's always my helper from Chabad Southwest Coral Springs, and Rabbi Yossi Reitzik from Chabad of West Boynton, Rabbi Koppel Silverberg from Chabad of Tamarack, and Rabbi Schmerling from Chabad of Venice. I thank everyone from wherever you're joining. It means so much that you join me. Again, next week we have an amazing class. It's on the Yartzeit. It's on the anniversary of the Rebbe's passing. So we have two great lecturers. We have Rabbi Label Shapiro, who's the president. He's the head of the Rabbinical Council of Miami. He's the dean of the yeshiva here, and he's a true scholar and a great lecturer. And Rabbi Yossi Liu, a dear colleague and friend of mine from Peachtree City, Georgia. So we have a wonderful program next week, the Rebbe's legacy, the Rebbe's leadership, the Rebbe's influence, and I hope you'll join me then. Rabbi Elkanah, I can't thank you enough. It was really informative, and we see from you how truly the Rebbe's words from early on, the Rebbe had the vision of embracing the technology, and thanks to you and all of your innovation, you're taking the Rebbe's words and teachings and spreading it out to as it says, when the Baal Shem Tov asked the Mashiach, when are you going to come? He says, when your teachings are spread forth. And we see, thanks to you, sure enough, the teachings of the Rebbe and about Mashiach are truly, you're able to access it all across the globe. So there's no reason why Mashiach doesn't come this very moment. And hopefully this Gimel Tammuz, we will be reunited with the Rebbe, with the coming of Mashiach and the rebuilding of the third and final Holy Temple. Thank you again, Elkanah. Thank you, everybody else, for joining. And thank you, all the Chabad houses that help make this possible. See you next time, 7:30 Wednesday night.